What's up, Jersey students? How you doing? We live? We live? There we go. Stayed dark for a second there. Can anyone else smell summer? It smells like summer, right? We're getting there. Few more weeks left of school. Unless you're homeschooled, you might be done already. Some of you guys, but summer is getting there, man. Summer is getting there, which is crazy because we're starting a new series tonight. That's going to be 3 weeks. And then we've got a summer night, and then it's Care Week, which is crazy. It is 8 days into May. We are often running towards summer, and it is coming fast. So we can't wait for that. We're going to be in this new series called Live Sense, where we've got this really cool background here of an astronaut guy. We're not going to Mars. We're not going to the moon like that guy might be. But we're talking about we're going to spend 3 weeks looking at what it looks like to live on mission here on earth for the kingdom of God. As we seek the kingdom, we've talked a lot about this verse from Matthew this year. Seek first the kingdom. And we're going to keep doing that. And so if you have your Bibles with you, go ahead and turn with me to Matthew chapter 5. We are back in the Sermon on the Mount. We'll be in verses 13 through 16. So tonight we are talking about what it looks like to be salt and light in this world. Salt and light. So naturally, I spent a lot of time thinking about light this week, as just what the passage is about. Thinking about light. And it made me think of a few things. I thought back to when I moved into my apartment the first night. I moved out of my parents' house in November, and so I've got my own apartment with a roommate, a friend of mine, and I realized two things that night. The first one was when I went to shower that I didn't have a shower curtain. I guess I kind of assumed that it came with the apartment, which I guess would be weird. So I had to go to Target at like 9 o'clock on a Saturday night so I could take a shower in the morning for church. That was a real problem. But then the next thing I realized is that when I walked into my room and I flipped on the switch and nothing happened. And I start looking, and the ceiling is bare. There was no light in the room. The switch was just there connected to an outlet. And so I quickly realized that I need to figure out something in my room for light so I could see, because it was dark already. The sun was going down in November at 5:30, 6 o'clock. And so all I had for that night was just my desk lamp, which was not very bright. And honestly, I've only gotten one more lamp since. I probably need another one or two. And it is not connected to the switch. So the switch does nothing in my room. But I've got just enough light to get by. Just enough. But my window faces the east, so I get great light in the morning. It's fantastic. But that's besides the point. But the light is important because it illuminates the room when it gets dark. That we need the light, and it's put in a strategic spot. When I only had that lamp, I had to be really strategic where I was going to put it, where I could get the most amount of light to fill my room, to see what I was doing. And it was rough that night because I was trying to unpack everything, and it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. I needed more light. But let's get to the text. Let's get to Matthew 5. We'll be in 13 through 16, like I said. Let me read for us. He says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, then it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." Like I said, we are back in the Sermon on the Mount, and it's important that we talk about where in the sermon we are. And we're in chapter 5, so we're in the beginning. Jesus has just said the Beatitudes. This is what immediately precedes these 4 verses here. You know, like the poor, blessed are the poor in the spirit, all these blessings that he does. And this is his introduction to his sermon, his intro. And the first words after his introduction is, "You are the salt of the earth." I guess that's one way to hold attention. Hold on, Jesus. We're what? We're salt of the earth. Interesting. Okay. Um, yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to contemplate what it means to be salt. And I think it makes sense what it means, but it doesn't mean it's not weird. Like, I still think it's really weird that Jesus chooses to use this illustration. But salt was really important. And maybe you've heard pastors preach on this text before, but we have to understand what salt was used for in this context. In the ancient world, salt was super important because they used it as a preservative. Because refrigerators didn't exist. They didn't have the Midwest second fridge in the garage with the deep freezer next to it. Like, that didn't exist in ancient Israel. So they had to figure out a way to make sure their steaks didn't go rotten. Because I'm just picturing, like, you have these awesome steaks that you just got. They're probably goat or sheep or something. But we'll imagine a goat steak. You just had your goat processed or whatever, and you've got to feed your family for the next couple of weeks. But you can't eat that meat that fast. You know it is going to rot if you wait 3 weeks to eat your goat. You're not going to be enjoying that. So what would you do? You would cover it in salt. And the salt would preserve the meat so that you could store it for longer. Now, it wasn't like magic where you could store it forever. Like, there was still a limit, but the salt would extend that time. And so it was really valuable. It was really important. You didn't want your meat to go bad. You don't want to come back in 3 weeks to your steak covered in flies and maggots and smelling and just like, picture that. It's pretty gross. That's not what you want with your nice steaks. It's not what you want. So you cover in salt and it's good to go for at least a little while. So Jesus is calling his disciples the salt of the earth, which really just means that he is calling us to be his preservatives here in the world, that we are to preserve the things of God. Because if you think about this world, like, I know you're young, but you're not blind. That you can see the evil in this world. You can see sin all over the place. You can see the decay and the rot of what it's doing in people's lives. And God is calling us to be a preserving agent in this world, to preserve the things of him, to preserve the good things, so that as we move on, that we might be a light. We're preserving peace. We're preserving love. We're preserving the message of the gospel that is needed in every generation. He's calling us to be a preservative in our culture, in our world, in Pataskala, in New Albany, Gahanna. We have too many cities here. I'm not going to list them all. Wherever you are, that's where we're called. This is our purpose as a disciple of Jesus. And he moves on. He says, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything, but to be thrown on the ground like dirt. Why? Because the salt's got one purpose. Saltiness is what salt is. Like, it can't really be separated. But if you just happen to have salt that had no flavor, that did nothing, it would be useless to us. There would be no need to keep it because it's no longer serving its purpose. In the same way, as disciples of Jesus, we are called to a purpose. We have a job to do, to be salt in this world. And if we're not living that out, if we're not fulfilling our purpose, then what are we doing? What are we doing? And I'm not here trying to convince you that you can lose your salvation. That's not what this message is about. It's a challenge to, are you living out your purpose? Are you salty? Are you salty? He moves on to verse 14. He repeats almost the same exact phrase, but he just changes what we are. He says, you are the light of the world. Now, I'm not a big grammar guy, but I like how he phrases both of these sentences. It's not you will be, you should be, you could be. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. This is who we are. This is our purpose. This is what we're designed to do as a disciple of Jesus. And Jesus gives us two illustrations for light. He says, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. I think of this in two different ways. In the daytime, if a city's up on a hill, like, it's there. You're not going to miss it. It's hard to miss because it's raised up. But then at night, when it's dark and you can barely see, you're going to see that city still because the light's going to be coming from it. You're going to see the torches. You're going to see the fire. In modern context, you're going to see the skyscrapers. You're going to see the lights. You're going to see the posts that line the streets that light it up. That's unmistakable. We can't miss it. It made me think of playing hide and seek with a child. Has anyone ever played hide and seek with a child? I'm sure a lot of you have. They're bad. Like, really bad. Because they think that they're hiding, but they're really not. And I would play with my sister all the time. And I'm pretty good at hide and seek. But she made it pretty easy on me. And I'm just picturing this image of you're counting down and you walk in the living room. And there's a big lump on the couch, right? And there's this child hiding underneath a blanket. And it's obvious to us where the kid is hiding. It's unmistakable. It's like that city on a hill that we can't miss it. And then depending what kind of hide and seek player you are, you either play around and act like, oh, where'd they go? Or you rip off the blanket and just end the game. You got two options, really. That's your choice. But we'll move on. You can guess what kind I was. It depended on the day. And then he moves on and he says, no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. I'm thinking about that first night that I'm back in my apartment, and I just had this little lamp on my desk. What good would it have done me if I throw a blanket on top of it? Or if I take that lamp and I put it underneath my bed? What good is that light going to do? I want to be stubbing my toe all over the place and not having a fun time. The purpose of the lamp, the purpose of the candle, of the light, is to illuminate the room so that we might see what is going on. And he's saying in this world that we are the light, that we are to shine the good news of Jesus, that we are to deflect who God is to this world. And in verse 16, we see the purpose behind what we do as salt and light. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. It's not so they might see how good you are and praise you, tell you how good you are. No. It's about the Father's glory. It's all about Him. This is really interesting that he phrased it this way because right after this in chapter 6, he talks, the 6 verse 1 is, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others. But here, he is saying, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works. That there's a line here, the purpose and the intent behind it. That our purpose as being salt, our purpose as being light, is that we might point everything back to Jesus, to His glory. That the people around us might recognize that He is King and give Him the glory. I was just thinking about this as we were singing that last song. Yet not I, but Christ in me. As we are salt and as we are light, yet not I, but Christ in me. So how do we do this? How do we be salty and lit Christians? This is the question. How do we be salty and lit? Tyler was telling me about one of his youth pastor friends that has a shirt that just says salty and lit. And I would have loved to have gotten one of those for you. that I could wear tonight, but I wasn't paying for extra shipping. It's not worth it. But salty and lit Christians, how do we live as salt of the earth and light in this world? We have to remember that we have a purpose. We have to remember that we have a job. And it is to be these things, salt and light in this world. And the job is not just to be those things, but to point back to the Father, to point back to Jesus. That we are the preservatives, the salt of this world. What does it look like to be a preservative in our world? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought about that question. How do we preserve the things of God in this world? Is this we live as Jesus, right? That is the call of the Christian, to grow in holiness, to be sanctified, to grow to be more and more like Jesus, that we might reflect him, that we might act the way that he acts. That saltiness, this flavor, it looks like love. It looks like humility, hospitality, bearing burdens with one another, kindness, living an upright life. It's basically everything that the world is not. It's how we were called to live. That our good works might be a sign of our salt. So I'm going to ask you a weird question. How's your flavor? How's your flavor? Are you tasting salty? Or are you tasting like not much at all? Would people be able to tell that you're in the cooking? And we'll call the cooking the kingdom. How's your flavor? And then the light. I really want to talk about the placement of light, which is each of you, which is me, the placement of the light. If we just imagine with me that you were all, let's say, a candle. I'll let you pick your scent of candle, but we don't have to do that right now. We'll each be our individual candle that is lit, because we're lit Christians, right? And he spreads you out throughout this world so that you might illuminate the world, that your light might shine in your sphere of influence, the people around you, that there might be light on them, that they might see you. I was listening to a sermon on Monday on this same passage, and the pastor was talking about when he was building his house, that he learned how important it was to be strategic with where you place lights, where you put them in the kitchen, where you put them in the hallway, so that they're efficient, that they spread the most light possible. I had to be strategic in my room where I was placing my lights so that I could see everything. That we're intentional with where we put lights. In the ancient days, when they just had these candles or these wax lamps, they had to be intentional to light up the room as best as possible. And if we are candles in this world, how intentional is God with us? Where he's placing you to be lights in this dark world, where he's placing you. He's probably placing you in places that I can't be. I'm 23 years old. I cannot be in your band room. I cannot be in 5th period math. I can't just show up in your lunchroom. I can't go to practice with your sports teams. That's because he's got you there. He doesn't need me to be there because he's already put you there to be a light. He's put you there to be salt. So how are you influencing the people around you? Are you shining bright? When it gets hard, are you trying to hide the light? That can be a real temptation at times. When it gets uncomfortable, when it gets awkward, and maybe you try and shield it a little bit so you don't stick out as much. As I was thinking this week, I was convicted about my own sphere of influence. How am I being light in this world? And here it's easy. With you guys, it's easy. At the church, I'm here a lot. I'm often in this sphere of influence. And it's easy to be a bright light here. But the Lord was just convicting me when I'm out when I'm at a coffee shop, when I'm getting dinner somewhere, when I'm in a grocery store. Too often my focus is on what I need to be doing and avoiding strangers as much as possible. Most of you guys know John Brad Riley. I wish I could be more like Brad. Brad loves talking to strangers. He's always telling people about Jesus. He's not afraid to talk to the random person standing in line with him at the grocery store or everywhere he goes. I wish I could be a little bit more like Brad, where if we're to shine bright if most of the people in my sphere of influence here are believers, and I'm to go out in this world, most of those people are going to be strangers. And to be honest with you, I don't really love talking to strangers. That's a challenge for me. That's where the Lord was getting at me this week. And so I ask you the same challenge. Are you shining bright? What's your flavor? Are you influencing those around you? And above all, are you pointing them back to Jesus? That they might glorify him. Joe, you can come on up as we finish this out. And I thought I would just point this out. As we're talking about spheres of influence, where your light is shining, that it's almost summer. And in your classes, in your sports, these classes are probably never going to be the same again. You might never have the same influence or be around the same people that you are right now. And there's only a few weeks left in the school year. Are you going to take advantage of this time that you have, where you can be a light to them, where you can be salt, that you could point them to Jesus? Because this is why we do everything that we do. Everything that we do should point back to the Father. So go and be salty and lit.